Hello, I'm Brigantia Blackbird of Blackbird's Brew. Happy Tuesday. Once again, it's time to talk about challenges and problems that are specific to the witchcraft and pagan world, and today's topic has to do with the nature of power. But before we can really get into that, we first have to examine what power is. Now, I'm going to be consulting the Merriam-Webster dictionary because I'm a little weary with the way people will just make up whatever definitions that happen to suit themselves at the moment, particularly when those definitions don't have a good intellectual underpinning. So we are not going to do that today. We're going to look at what is the common agreement of this word. So there are three main meanings that the Merriam-Webster dictionary assigns to power. The first one is the ability to act or produce an effect. Number two is relating to or utilizing strength. And the third is control, authority, or influence over others. When we look at all three of these definitions, we find that they have relevance and hold true in witchcraft and wizardry and practical magic. By the very definition, the use of magic requires having the ability to wield that energy and to create a result with it. It is also necessary to have a considerable strength of will, as well as mental discipline in order to successfully work magic. And whether someone is a practical magician, which is someone who works with magic outside of a spiritual context, or someone who is a witch or wizard, which is someone who works magic within a spiritual context, the fact remains that magic is using the creative powers of the universe itself. That necessitates having control over what one is doing and learning wisdom along the way. The need for wisdom is integral to magic because magic can wreak havoc when it's used by irresponsible, thoughtless, or immoral people. At the very least, a practitioner needs to have a sense of authority over themselves, self-ownership, if you want a more modern term. And it can't be denied that magic can be used to influence people, which is a dubious practice when done with even the most benign of intentions, and that's if you can actually somehow rationally justify that the desire to control people could ever be described as benign. And that's a hell of a hill to climb. And it's also a different topic. So moving along. From time to time, I do see a meme that periodically makes the rounds on pagan forums, and it states that witchcraft is not about gaining power. It is about learning how and when to use it. So unlike most memes, which fall far short of accuracy, this one actually gets it right. If someone is able to work magic, that person already has power, by definition. It's just a question of training their magical muscles as opposed to somehow absorbing more power into themselves or acquiring it or grasping it through some external means. Now, we can certainly tap into other sources of power, the natural world, the gods, as we've previously touched on in other videos, but when it comes to that root core, it is coming from within, not from without. So, what is it that diminishes our own personal power? I'm going to discuss three things. It's not limited to these three things, but I think most issues fall under these three broad categories. The first is harboring ideas that are in opposition to reality. Nature always wins, period. Objective reality is that which is going on around us, regardless of our hopes and fears that can be observed and quantified. And that not only includes the natural world, but it is an integral aspect of it. Now, we can choose to ignore reality, but we can't avoid the consequences of doing that for forever. Therefore, whatever our philosophical or our theological ideas, it's useful to compare them to how things actually work in reality, and then adjust ourselves and our viewpoints to accommodate reality, rather than railing against the universe for not conforming to our personal preferences. A lot of people seem to be doing that these days, and there are horrifically unhappy and frustrated people, and it's because the universe and how it works is not going to budge for you. It's not how it works. It's not how any of this works. So if we are not aligned with what is, then we can expend all the energy that we have at our disposal, but it will have very little effect because we will be trying to manifest things that are outside the realm of possibility. Keep in mind, magic is a natural force, and it works in accordance with natural law. It does not break natural law. It is an expression of applied principles of natural law. Now, another issue that really can diminish our own personal power is accepting other people's opinions as facts. It's sad but true that not everyone we come into contact with is going to be a nice person, let alone someone who will be supportive of a magical form of spirituality. And placing undue importance on such viewpoints, it creates a psychological block, and that prevents us from reaching our full potential. There is also a very loud segment of society that promotes the material as all-encompassing, and that there's nothing outside of it, and they denigrate people who don't share their view, and they actively insult those who see the spiritual nature of existence, particularly those of us who realize that the spiritual aspect of it is really quite self-evident, not popular in certain circles. And if that kind of thinking, worms its way into our subconscious, it can be extremely demoralizing, and that creates self-doubt. And self-doubt is a poison. You could even call it a cancer to being able to wield magic. It is the most horrific form of self-sabotage that there is. Another issue deals with opposition from relatives. I mean, it's one thing to bear the brunt of strangers. At the end of the day, whoever's criticizing us, who we don't really know, they don't pay our bills, they haven't played a role in our lives, and they're not going to be, sitting with us when we're on our deathbeds, holding our hands as we cross over into the veil. In the long run, they don't really matter, and neither do their little opinions. And consequently, that means that there is a limit to how much strangers can hurt us emotionally. But it's a very different story where family members are concerned. And it can be challenging to persevere in our studies and our practices when those closest to us make no secret of their disapproval or their opposition. Thankfully, not every family is like that, but I know that there are people who are in that situation. Very difficult. Now, the third thing that can really mess with our ability to draw upon our own power, or that actively tamps us down, it's maintaining a false self-image. When we become aware of our magical talents, unfortunately, this does not inoculate us from mental health issues, one example being depression. I wish it did. I mean, you might think that it would, but it's just not really how it works. Having abilities that you can begin to explore, it doesn't change, the internal issues that you've already been struggling with. So, feelings of unworthiness, numbness, apathy, sadness, defeatism, it will lessen our magical effectiveness. Another issue having to do with false self-image is an overinflated view of one's importance and abilities. Just because someone thinks they're the bee's knees, it does not make it so. And over the years, I've encountered a lot of practitioners, or those who claimed to be practitioners, who were very happy to tell other people in the group that they were the great and powerful Oz, and of course they were nothing of the kind. All of that posturing was very empty. It did not bestow upon them a single additional drop of magical capability. It definitely did not make them better educated or have a greater skill set, let alone having a more natural means to interact with the natural forces. It gave them nothing. And in a way, why would they? Why would they go to the effort to educate themselves? Why would they learn new skills? Why would they practice, and get better? They're not being honest with themselves. And because of that, it's hampering their own efforts, and what the ability that they do have, it gets muted by their own delusions. But on the flip side, selling ourselves short and having an overly modest view of our capabilities can also get in the way of us reaching our potential. Until we try, we can't really be sure to what degree our magical muscles can be strengthened, or what hidden talents we may eventually unlock. I mean, yes, we should have some humility, and we should definitely have a sense of responsibility about what we do. But we should also keep an open mind about what we might be able to do, especially once we have more knowledge, we've learned some new skills, and we practice very consistently. We might surprise ourselves. Sometimes our limits are not what we first believe them to be. So how can we turn this issue of power into using it in a healthy way? First thing I would suggest is focusing on fixing yourself before trying to fix the world. Your ability to affect yourself, mind, body, and soul will always greatly outweigh your ability to infect the entire planet, or even just a country. If you focus only on these tidal waves of energy that come from the rest of the world, and at the expense of paying attention to your internal ebb and flow, I'm sorry, but this is a distraction. It's also a handy-dandy excuse for when your workings have little to no effect. After all, it was you against the tide, and lo and behold, the tide was stronger. Funny how that works. However, if you're turning on yourself and thinking about how you can improve yourself, areas of concern, things to continue to nurture, there's no caveat of, well, it was me against this bigger force. No. I mean, that's not to say that self-work isn't difficult. It is, but it's entirely with our own power to do it. And the issue is usually willpower rather than the amount of power that we have at our disposal. Just how much energy are we willing to put forth on this work? It forces us to look in the mirror and be honest, and not only about what's less than ideal, but also on things about ourselves and our capabilities that are good. And coming to terms with this and really practicing self-honesty and being at peace with the process, learning not to hate it, but to be grateful for the insights it provides, will be absolutely invaluable to us. And the more we are in alignment with our own natures and our own purposes, and building ourselves up accordingly so we can be what we ought to be, the greater peace we will experience, even during difficulties and in the midst of great stress. And when we're more at peace with ourselves, that in turn has a good impact on the people around us, and that can ripple out to the broader world. So if you're concerned about having a good impact on the world, maybe that needs to start at home. And by starting at home, I mean inside your own head, and then working outwards from there. On the magical and spiritual level, if we go through this process and embrace it, we will be less prone to self-sabotage, and our own natural energies will flow more easily, and it'll be easier to wield our magic more effectively. Now, for our immediate household. If the first sphere of influence is ourselves, then the next is surely the household that we're in. And whatever your position within your household is, your magic can be helpful to creating a better spirit within the home, greater understanding, a better atmosphere, even if you're having to work very discreetly. So whatever your job is within the household structure, try to fulfill it and strive for excellence. Anything worth doing is worth doing well. Even if you don't do it very well today, you can certainly get better. Now, granted, it's true that not all the times will we have relationships with other members of the household that are in a healthy condition or will ever be in a healthy condition, be that within a marriage or the family in general, friendships, roommates. However, even when we are at odds with others, there is such a thing as right doing, and it's possible to fulfill our obligations to the household while not actively contemplating or worrying about how others in the household are going to perceive our efforts, particularly if it's someone who is consistently critical to the point where they're just beyond being pleased. And sometimes the people who are acting like that, it's not just us, it's everyone. And if someone's going to be displeased and they're just determined to be unhappy with everything, then I don't think there's a whole lot of motivation to really worry about bending over backwards to accommodate their feelings or trying to gain approval of their eyes or anything of that kind. So the question then becomes, it's not about, what these cranky people might think about, what you do or don't do or how you do it. The issue is, are you doing your part for the household objectively? And if you are, that's enough. Never mind what barbs might be thrown at people who clearly have an unhealthy outlook and whose judgment is skewed. I'm not saying that they're never going to be able to get to us emotionally, but if we go through this process of thinking about, am I properly doing? Am I actually meeting my obligations? Am I doing what I ought to be doing? Then at a certain point, I think we do learn to have a little bit more emotional distance between ourselves and those who are just going to be critical of us no matter what. Practitioners also have the capability to protect the household in the ways that non-practitioners do not. So if you are the only practitioner within the household, take this as an opportunity, whether you're operating openly or discreetly, and use your skills for this purpose. It will be beneficial. And the third way to use our power in a healthy way is be a force for good in our spiritual communities. Now, I realize that a lot of us lack a local pagan community to connect with, But we do have online communities, and of course some of these are better than others, and not every community suits every person. But one way you can benefit most online communities is by participation. If people don't interact, what ends up happening is that there'll be a certain number of people who speak with little to no feedback, and then you have an unknown numbers of lurkers, and you have no idea if any of the information being shared is helpful to them, or what they think about it, if they agree, disagree, have any useful insights, if they're experienced or non-experienced. Nobody can tell because they're not opening their mouths. What are you going to do about that? So when you have the situation, what ends up happening is that the forum will stagnate and eventually it just dies and people go elsewhere. So it only makes sense to be an active co-creator of the community that you wish to have. A third way to be a force for good within your community is to share your knowledge, your skills, and your experiences. When you are around those who are elders in the craft, or at least more experienced than you are, ask them to share what they can teach you. Try to engage them in conversation. Ask them open-ended questions that aren't so much yes or no, but more philosophical and what do they think, why do they think it. Can they ask them to take you through their thought process as they decide what to do about something on a magical level. Just understanding the thought process in of itself can be extremely instructive. So ask them. And of course, in due course, consider becoming a teacher yourself. The only way others are going to follow this path and that witchcraft and paganism won't die is by passing on what we've learned. And whether we do that in a large way or a small way, just try to leave something behind that's of spiritual value. Those of us who are now practicing, we're just one moment in the whole history of witchcraft, just one. And it's worthwhile considering what part we play in ensuring that witchcraft will continue to endure and that paganism won't die out all over again. So, that's what I think I have to say about the nature of power at the moment. I hope it's been useful to you. Be sure to let me know what you happen to think about it. And of course, if you would like to, feel free to join our community in Discord where we can have more extensive conversation on this and on other topics. There will be a link in the description box below. I guess that's it.